Welcome back. I'm Andrew Comstock, a wealth advisor at Beyond Wealth. And our video today is going to be something that's going to be a little personal. That's going to be talking about the biggest financial mistakes that I have made. So even financial planners are prone to making stupid money mistakes along the way. And so I'm going to share a few with you. So let's get started. The first one is not saving enough early in my career. And right out of college, I moved overseas, and so I didn't have an opportunity to participate in a 401k plan or even contribute to a traditional IRA or Roth IRA. And I should have done this ASAP as soon as I came back to the States, but it took me a little while to get on the financial planning ball. And this is a universal regret I hear from a lot of our clients as well. And so they wish they had started saving early, and I do the same. And we just let compounding do its thing. We all understand how that works. And remember that algebra class we took in high school or math in college where they talked about compounding and how those returns just accumulate on themselves. So biggest reason why this probably happened is you just didn't know how much to save. That was where I was at. I was like, should I be saving 2% of what I make or 50% of what I make? And the truth is obviously somewhere in between there. So saving too much too early is a great problem to have. Just wish I had done that. The second one is eating out too much. So when it comes to budget busters, there's a couple things that are usually on the list that we see. One of them is eating out too much. And this is probably something that you guys may have in your own experience at home. So exploring new restaurants with my wife and going out to dinner with friends or grabbing a beer and a bite to eat before I go to a sporting KC or a Royals game, something I love to do. And we all get in the habit sometimes of after work when we're tired, not wanting to cook when we get home. So we just default to go through a drive-through with kids or, order Postmates or, go out to dinner just because it's easier. And if you like eating out, allocate some of your spending money or part of your budget towards that and be intentional about it. But don't let convenience dictate how we spend money, because gosh knows I probably am over budget by a couple $100 a month just because I like to eat out. The third item is falling for the airline mile trap. Everyone loves those airline miles, whether you get it from traveling, whether you get it from credit cards or some other way you can kind of accumulate those frequent flyer or other mileage programs. And if you use these miles, they can be completely worth it. Now, most people allow these things to accumulate for that dream trip. And there's some of our clients are really disciplined. I am one of those people. I've hoarded these things for years. And so and these are not an asset. They actually depreciate over time. So if you notice about every year or two, it takes a lot more miles or points to actually do something that you want to do with them. And so that's a depreciating asset almost by definition. So I've got 2 credit cards with American Airlines, and I have not flown American Airlines in like 18 months. And I literally have 100,000 plus miles with them, and I'm accumulating more points that I may or may not use. So I need to either switch my miles, switch my credit card to some type of program that I'm going to use, maybe a Southwest airline card, or just get cashback rewards or something like that. And so I'm paying for the privilege to accumulate more miles with American as well. So just be mindful of that. And that's a mistake that I'm continuing to make, and I haven't quite fixed that problem. The fourth mistake I have is setting up or being late to the game of setting up an emergency fund. So I'm lucky. I actually got an emergency fund in place, but it took some hard lessons to get there. So I didn't set one up until my early 30s, right after when my wife and I got married. So I had a little bit of savings when we went on our honeymoon, probably like 1 month of expenses. And we got married during the financial crisis. And so in fact, we were on our honeymoon when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and I was working in finance at that time. So it was a tough environment to scrounge together and save to kind of build up a little bit of a reserve fund. But in 2014, I actually really needed those funds, and I'm glad I had kind of a buffer of 3 or 6 months of expenses in place. When I was diagnosed with cancer back in 2014, we had a ton of out-of-pocket expenses and loss of income and a lot of other things that happen whenever you have a major medical hit happen. And the one thing that obviously was a stressful period for my wife and my family, but we never really worried about money because we had built up kind of that reserve fund so that we could pay those deductibles, as those bills came in, and those bills definitely come in. We were able to just focus on, the goal of getting, me healthy at that time. And we were able to just pay the bills. And so, saving for an emergency fund or a rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it, is one of those things that a lot of people frequently put off, but you never know where you're going to need it. And so it's something that whether you're early in your career or even in your 50s or 60s, you definitely want to make sure you have that nest egg stashed away because you're going to need it at some point. My fifth one is buying a bad life insurance policy. Again, something that happened kind of around when I got married. I needed life insurance. It's something that most folks start to look at when either they get married, buy a house, or start having a family. So I reached out, or I had a friend reach out to me on LinkedIn at the right time, and he suggested a whole life insurance policy, and I had pretty much limited knowledge of insurance at that point. I wasn't working as in kind of a wealth advisor or financial planner. And it seemed a little bit expensive, but the math made sense when I bought this. And so in reality, all I needed was a term life insurance policy that probably would have cost me a quarter of the cost of this whole life policy that I was paying each month. And so I ended up surrendering that whole life policy a few years after I started it, and all the investment benefits magically disappeared. And the guy who sold it to me did too as well. So he left his job about 6 months after I bought the policy from him. So mixing insurance and investments is an opaque mess where the insurance company is the one who generally wins there. So that's my mistake. So even as a planner, I've made some dumb insurance purchases. Next up is confusing personal assets and investments. So easiest thing to think about here is the biggest asset you have probably when you hit mid-career is your house or that equity in your house. The biggest investment you probably have is like your workplace retirement plan or your 401k. And I often look at my home as an investment, or I kind of maybe wear different lenses when I'm looking at it. So my home is a place where we live and we make memories and we have a great time there. But its rate of return is going to be much more modest than what I'm probably going to get from investing in stocks or a diversified portfolio over time. I also am not planning on retiring and using my house necessarily as a giant fund to fund my retirement. And so a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, is every time I purchase a house, I generally think about it as like, well, how much money am I going to make on this thing over time? I probably should say, well, what's the memories I'm going to have on it? And can I afford it? Is this going to kind of help me along the way? But I think when it comes down to it, is your family's going to make memories in your house. But you're not going to make memories with your 401k. Your 401k is going to eventually help you, kind of reach those long-term financial goals. So making sure you have a clear definition of what's a personal asset. Maybe you buy a vintage guitar because you want it, or you buy a motorcycle like a Harley Davidson. That's going to be a personal asset. You're going to have fun with that. You're going to get enjoyment out of that. You're going to get pleasure out of that. But if you set up a future opportunity fund, something that we like talking about, that's going to be something that's more of an investment. It's going to be meant to be growing over time. And you may buy that Harley Davidson or something else down the line with that money. But those two things are very, very different. The last thing I'm going to talk about is more of a misconception, and that's overconfidence. And in 2007, I got my CFA charter, and for the first 10 years of my career, I was a stock analyst and a portfolio manager exclusively. That's kind of the hat that I wore. And so I did investment research all day, every day. It was really kind of the thing I was obsessed with, probably from 22 until even currently. But this does not necessarily mean, because I have this knowledge, that I am the most skilled at this. So sometimes you can get overconfident because you do have some knowledge. You probably have more knowledge than the average person, but that doesn't mean you're the best. And just because I think company A may do better than company B doesn't mean it's going to happen. And sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. So we have to maybe think about overconfidence in other areas of life. Maybe you're in real estate or you work in a different field, and you may have more knowledge than that. But sometimes that knowledge you may slip into something like overconfidence. So these are just a few of the mistakes that I've made. I've got a longer list that you can check out on our website in a blog or article that we've recently written. So, and I confess to a whole bunch of other stuff that I've done. So I appreciate your time today, and have a great week.